The question isn't can you franchise your business, it's should you. I'm going to share with you 4 things that so many business owners and founders fail to evaluate before making the decision about franchising their business. I'm Charles Internicola, and for the past 2 decades, we've worked with franchisors, founders, business owners, franchise their business and grow a franchise system. And over that time, we've spoke with hundreds of business owners. And so what we're going to share today is not a checklist, but 4 important factors that you need to be evaluating to assess your franchise readiness and determine if you should franchise your business. The problem that so many founders have is they're asking the wrong question, and consultants and advisors, they're also projecting the wrong questions. It's all focused on can you franchise? And again, anything can almost be franchised. You should be focused on should. And it's going to change your mindset, how you approach franchising, and how you succeed as a franchisor. If you focus on can, I promise you one thing, you're just going to get an FDD, an operations manual, you'll enter the franchise world. If you focus on should, you're going to be a step closer to building a thriving franchise system. And we see this so often. I'll meet a new franchisor that maybe franchised 2, 3, 4 years earlier. Everyone focused on the can question. They have their FDD, they have their operations manual, they entered the franchise world. Maybe they're struggling with franchise sales, or maybe they sold to franchisees that aren't a good fit. But they all have one thing in common. They weren't ready for what comes next. They weren't ready to build a franchise system, and many times they weren't ready to franchise their business. And that's why we're talking about franchise readiness assessment. And as we go through it, I want you to keep these considerations in mind. Can versus should. It's an important framework in PRISM that I want you to adopt as we talk about these 4 factors. Factor 1 is industry, and this surprises founders and business owners because you're thinking about your industry in terms of your customers. Who's your direct competition? Who are the customers you serve? When we're evaluating franchising and working with our clients, we're also focused on the competition in the franchise industry. That's going to play an important role in your readiness assessment. At the consumer level, your brand needs to be differentiated, you need to have a competitive advantage, and you need to have opportunity in the space. Are we dealing with an industry where there's mom and pop competitors, where you as a franchisor are building a network, economies of scale? There's an advantage and an opportunity for you as a new franchise brand. On the franchise side, we're evaluating what the competition looks like when you become a franchisor. Is this a new industry? Is there white space? Are you an early adopter or first mover? And so when we enter the franchise world, with your strong consumer positioning, there's not much franchise competition. And we've seen plenty of new emerging industries that are now maturing where those early adopters, first adopters, second, third, fourth, and even beyond that, those early movers, as they entered the franchise space, had significant opportunity. Or you in an industry, when we look at the franchise landscape, there's significant competition, maybe 10 or 12 other franchise brands. Doesn't mean you shouldn't franchise your business, but does mean we need to calibrate, understand what the competition is, how you differentiate your brand, and most important, set your expectations as you become a franchisor, as you plan out what franchise success looks like, and as you decide if you should franchise your business. So industry, evaluating it is not going to answer the yes or no, should you franchise? It's context. It's there to help you set expectations and evaluate the overall decision as you plan this next step and as you decide what success can and should look like for you. Factor 2 is unit economics, and this is the one you should spend the most time on. At a foundational level, you need to be profitable, superior unit economics, outperforming the competition. And it sounds straightforward, but your profitability alone, that's not the only factor. You need to evaluate whether or not your franchisees can replicate your unit economics, can replicate your profitability, achieve similar financial results. Now, when making this evaluation, consider franchisees will be starting up in new markets. They're going to be in the startup phase of their business. They're going to have higher expenses than you have. They're going to have franchise fees, royalties, other expenses that you don't have today. So you need to evaluate your unit economics, your profitability, and ultimately, can franchisees replicate it? As a franchisor, getting back to the should you franchise, Consider that strong franchise systems are not built on franchise sales, they're built on franchisee success. And while your franchisees have higher costs and startup phases, are you as a franchisor going to support them, over-index on their build-out, on their support, on their coaching, help them achieve strong unit economics? And along the way, as you grow your network, you create economies of scale, supply chain, marketing, know-how. Great franchise brands get that flywheel spinning, not only for their franchise company, but for also their franchisees. So as you evaluate unit economics, evaluate should you franchise, can your unit economics be replicated by franchisees, and can they do it in new markets and with additional expenses? Factor 3 is capital. And this is where I have to reframe conversation with founders, because many times they have the wrong question, which is they ask, do I have enough money or enough capital to franchise my business, for my FDD, for legal, for my operations manual? But the real question is, do you have the capital to grow a franchise system? Remember, the goal is not to become a franchisor and franchise your business, it's to build a franchise system. And the good news is that franchising is scalable, but we need to align expectations and strategy with your capital. So if you said you want to sell 35 units in year one, which I would never think is a good idea, I would ask you, how much capital do you have to invest not only in franchise sales, but more importantly, in franchisee support, in team members? So capital is a function of the sequencing and timing. And generally, we recommend that you focus on a 5-year strategy. Years 1 and 2, develop seasoning your franchise offering, building the base, becoming a franchisor, organically attracting your first 1, 2, 3, 4 franchisees, building support around them. And then when you get to year 3, you're pioneering franchisees. Hopefully they're successful, they validate, they have good unit economics. Well, now you could start turning on more franchise sales, building out your franchise support team. So the important takeaway here is that capital is not just about becoming a franchisor, it's about the long term, or at least a 5-year game plan. It needs to be aligned with your expectations and goals. And if you're applying a strategy of seasoning your franchise offering first, years 1 and 2, and then starting to scale in years 3, 4, and 5, well, that's going to modulate and determine what your capital needs are. You could grow into your franchise growth. We have clients, we've seen brands that start off as local small businesses, and maybe in the first 4 years have only sold 5, 6, 7 franchises, and they look like slow growth companies. But within their capital constraints, they've built out their team, they're supporting their franchisees, and 4 years later, they have thriving franchisees, solid unit economics, great validation. Well, those brands have the opportunity to grow and scale. Others that expect too much in sales or spend all of their capital and funds up front in years 1 and 2, they may burn out. You need to develop a base. You need franchisees that are achieving solid unit economics that validate for your franchise system. So on the should you franchise your business, what's your capital, not only for franchising your business, but long term as you go through the next 1, 2, 3, 5 years. And you don't need to have it all up front, but you need to have that source of capital available to your business and needs to align with your franchise sales strategy. Factor 4 is the one no one talks about, and it's probably the most important. Your goals, your mindset as a founder and as a business owner. When you franchise your business, the goal is not just selling franchises and increasing revenue. As a new franchisor, your primary goal, your primary obligation is to help franchisees replicate your business and successfully achieve strong unit economics, to make them profitable, to make their investment worthwhile. They're going to be banking a lot on that, their families, their commitment, their investment. So this fourth factor is really it's not a legal question or a technical question. It's about entrepreneurship and you as an entrepreneur, as a business owner with limited time and potentially amazing opportunities ahead for you. Does building a franchise organization align with what you want to be doing? Franchise sales, building a franchise team, supporting and over-supporting your franchisees, helping your franchisees achieve their economic goals, and building an organization and infrastructure that's bigger than you, that's bigger than the business that you started. When we speak to successful franchisors, the founders, and have the conversations a decade later and hear about their stories about how they started the business and then it led to franchising and how they now look at their franchise system today. The tens or hundreds of franchisees that entrusted their families and their time with their franchise system, they reflect on building something much bigger than themselves. They reflect on a commitment to systems, to discipline, to honoring the commitment of their franchisees and helping them succeed. So franchising is an amazing pathway. It's not bad if this franchising doesn't align with your goals, but don't enter the franchise world just to sell franchises or just to increase revenue, because it's a long road. Look at it as a 5-year journey. Look at it as building your franchise system, seasoning your franchise offering, supporting your franchisees, and growing something much bigger than your organization. And along the way, you're going to be investing capital. You're going to have your ups and downs. So when you're making the assessment, when you're making the decision, when you're answering should you franchise your business, don't overlook your goals, don't overlook your mindset and where you want to be over the next 5 years. So those are the 4 factors. Industry, what does the competitive landscape look like at the consumer level and at the franchise level? And where's the opportunity? Unit economics, are you achieving superior unit economics, profitability? And can your franchisees replicate the profitability when you consider they're entering new markets and have additional expenses? Capital, do you have the capital not only to enter the franchise world for an FDD and to become a franchisor, but to grow a franchise system? And that also requires the right strategy, which is seasoning your franchise offering and growing at a pace that matches your capital investment. And most important, your mindset as a founder, your goals. Do they align with building a franchise organization? Do they align with supporting franchisees? If all those factors come into play and they're all pointing in the right direction, well, the should you franchise your business, the analysis is pretty straightforward. But if there's a lack of clarity as to any one of them, well, that's where the work comes in. That's where you need to be diving deeper and evaluating, are you ready for franchising? And in our link, we've put a franchise readiness assessment. You'll gain access to what we've discussed, these franchise readiness factors that you should be assessing as you decide whether or not you should franchise your business.